Hey guys, Marsinkin here, bringing another Dragon Ball Z Dokkan Battle video, and so today I wanted to talk a little bit about the STR Kefla EZA and the effect that it has had on the community when it comes to expectations for EZAs, and why we talked about this a little bit on the podcast last night, but why this is such a confusing decision in the light of recent developments on both versions of the game, because there's a very significant difference in the landscape on JP and Global at the moment, and it's not just because JP has obviously gone through the anniversary content experience and now is on the other side of that, but for Global, the fact that we are now having Saiyan Day with the simultaneous release of the Tech Vegeta. We got the Super EZA for Super Saiyan 3 Goku, and of course the most recent announcement for the next Dokkan Fest exclusive EZA is going to be the STR Super Vegeta. So the thing is with Global, they dropped this Kefla EZA as well as the EZAs for the Tech Caulifla and the STR Kale with the Rosé for the Global First Goku Black Rosé celebration, which was kind of slotted in between some of the existing stuff that we already knew about. I don't know if this is just part of the strategy to buy some extra time for Global to catch up to JP before the sync. You would assume so, right? Because they didn't replace a celebration with Goku Black. They just kind of slotted him in the middle, which means at some point JP is going to have his release, which I imagine they will use in place of a different celebration, and then that gives Global a little bit of extra time to catch up. But this unit came out, and a lot of people were very, very surprised. When this unit originally released back in 2020, if we take a look at her kit, she was never a particularly crazy unit. She largely relied on, especially with no defense on Super, picking up 6 orbs in order to be able to dodge, and then if you were not able to get 6 orbs, because she does not create her own, then, you know, you would potentially come across issues, especially defensively. And of course, she did already stack attack, but no additional super ability in her passive as well. And then as you transformed into Super Saiyan, very similar passive, and then the Super Saiyan 2 is where she had the built-in 50% chance to dodge and a guaranteed additional with 6 orbs. But then her EZA comes along and drops the dodge chance down to being 3 orbs, which is much more manageable, then an additional super when you get 6 orbs, and now she raises defense for the turn on her super attack, as well as having greatly raise attack as her stack. So this unit, I still see somewhat mixed opinions sometimes in the comment sections. I don't know if, I don't ever want to dismiss people's criticisms as being like, oh, you know, loads of people just hate Kefla, or people just hate Kale and Caulifla. But I do still see people criticize her and her potential for super difficult content, because even after a couple of super attacks, right, her defense is not enough that she's going to tank the hardest hitting bosses supers from the anniversary, and she's not particularly good against AoEs because she's a unit that gets most of her defense on super attack. But I mean, she is, at least when she dropped on Global, I think most people were surprised, especially us as Global players, of just how powerful she was. You know, dropping easily on the right rotation, like 20 mil attack stats on turn 1 and only increasing from there is pretty crazy for a unit that beforehand was kind of unimpressive, which for me, her EZA epitomizes what an EZA should be. Like, I didn't even really care about her that much when she came out, never had much reason to run her, and she of course has very much fallen into obscurity until her EZA came out, and then her EZA is very, very good. I mean, she is, I would say, the best EZA TUR on Global, potentially even up there for being the best TUR overall if we're including EZAs with all the other TURs. Now that Vegeta's released, I do think the Tech Vegeta is better than her. It takes him a while to build up to being able to do the kind of attack stats that she can do, like once he's transformed, but he dwarfs her ability defensively, like it's not even close, right? So I would say Vegeta is the best TUR on Global currently, but Kefla definitely is in the argument for being up in that top like 2 or 3 alongside him, or behind him ever so slightly, right? So Kefla's EZA, very, very good. Now, she is the exact example of what we want from an EZA, a unit that once the EZA has been applied, is super good. I mean, I tested her out in some videos against the actual anniversary content, and even then, right, she just absolutely puts in work. Sure, if she's not dodging the big supers, she's going to get killed, but unfortunately, with how hard the bosses are hitting in the anniversary content now, with some of them dropping like 3 million damage supers, units dying to their super attacks but tanking their normals is like the large majority of the good units in the game at this point. And it's only the upper echelon of the very best units in the game that are eating those super attacks, right? So Kefla, very, very good. Now, the problem at hand, if you want to call it that, is, and the point of the discussion, is the EZAs that have then followed Kefla. Because after Kefla, we had the release of the AGL Bardock on JP, and of course we've just had the announcement for STR Super Vegeta. Now, if we talk about Bardock, the thing with Kefla being a global first EZA is, of course, on JP, technically Kefla doesn't exist, her EZA, right? Like, it's not out on JP. So Bardock coming out, if his EZA was, you know, a little bit worse than Kefla, it probably wouldn't be such a big deal, right? Because then his EZA comes out. If he got a good EZA, but he wasn't quite as crazy as she can be, then, you know, that's fine. And then she comes out after him on JP. And, you know, it makes sense, right? In that logical sort of power creep progression. The problem is Bardock is kind of mid. In his base form, he is just very, very disappointing. Relies on a basically dead category if you want to get a extra attack, which is very, very useful for a unit that needs to stack in order to build up to the kind of defense he wants to have later on, even post-transformation. So his base form is not very good. Once he transforms, he can be pretty good. You know, if you haven't had a lot of build-up in the previous turns, his defense is not going to be crazy high pre-super. But post-super, his defense is decent. He's got a relatively good dodge chance. Like, once he's transformed, he's okay, right? But his base, most people are in agreement that his base form is terrible, right, after EZA. Or at least, maybe if you don't even want to go as far as terrible, mid to bad, right? And the problem is the massive gap between the two of them. Like I say, if he was only slightly worse than Kefla, then it wouldn't be a huge issue. But it just basically creates the memes that we've had in this community for so long now, when people talk about like Team A and Team B and stuff like that. It's like, how did they get somebody to design this Kefla EZA, say that this was okay to release? Because she's very powerful, which is fine. I'm okay with them releasing super powerful units. So they said, yep, sure, this is cool, ship it. And then someone comes to the desk with this AGL Bardock EZA design, and the team's like, yeah, that's fine, release that as it is. Even though Kefla just came out on Global, this EZA was the 12th of March for JP, and Kefla's EZA was the 23rd of February. So, what, 3 weeks later, basically, this unit came out on JP. Now, again, you can use the argument that, well, Kefla's not out on JP, so, you know, an EZA that comes out there, gonna be weaker than her, then she comes out later on JP, and that makes sense for the logical progression of power creep. However, then we have STR Super Vegeta. So STR Super Vegeta's EZA has just been announced. He comes out on Monday morning. I'll have a team building guide up for his EZA tomorrow night, but he has gotten his EZA. And whilst I do think that he is being downplayed, he's being underrated a little bit too much on the timeline I'm seeing, which, you know, always happens when unit details come out. I'm sure some of those people will switch up when we get to see him in game, but who knows. But he is another unit that is just not on the same level as Kefla. And the problem is, for Global, it's the same time celebration. He is releasing after Kefla for Global. So he is the next big, like, TUR EZA for a Dokkan Fest exclusive that we are getting after Kefla, and he is arguably not as good as her. Now, there's a bit of a different distinction on Global, because Global, we're still stuck in that sort of short event meta with AoEs, which can be very annoying. And Kefla, as I've already mentioned, not the best against AoEs if she has to actually take the hit. She, of course, does have the 50% chance to dodge with 3 orbs. But this guy having guard for 5 turns makes him very useful in those events. And obviously, you know, once he's actually in the game, I'm going to be doing showcases for him against Omega and Zamasu. He's going to be in a good spot where a unit like Tech Vegeta can handle the heavy lifting for the tanking in slot 1. But then an AoE hits this guy. He gets his buff by getting hit before he attacks. Then he attacks in slot 2, drops a guaranteed crit, does a huge attack stat, and he's going to look pretty decent. But Again, the problem is not so much that he's not better than Kefla, because I don't necessarily think every single new release of every new Dokkan Fest or every new EZA should automatically be the new best one. But the difference is in the levels of power. Now, obviously, we need to see this guy in-game to get his full scope of his performance, but he needs to get hit first, but he's not a unit that is necessarily going to be the best in slot 1, because remember, whilst he does have guard for 5 turns, he gets 100% attack and defense on super, and then he gets extra defense with each super attack performed, as well as attack, and then he gets an extra attack and defense after receiving an attack. So he gets hit once, then he gets a buff, and then of course he does get extra defense and guard after receiving an attack, as well as getting an additional super if there's an enemy whose name includes Cell, which is kind of pointless, right? There's no real events where that comes into play because it doesn't include Cell Max, which is odd. So if the first attack of the turn he takes is a super, he hasn't gotten any of those buffs. So just having 200% defense start of turn and then guard is not going to be enough, right? So you're not going to want to put him in slot 1. So he's not always necessarily going to be getting that defensive buff. Now, when it comes to AoE normals, he should be okay to take those relatively well. But he is a unit that is going to be in a similar sort of boat to Kefla when it comes to, you know, if he's going to eat a big attack at the start of the turn. Now, once both of these units have super attacked, their defense goes up pretty significantly. Once he takes some hits and gets the build up from his passive, he's going to be looking pretty good. My big thing, I really want to see what his start of turn defense is going to be on his second appearance. If he obviously took the hit on the previous turn and got, I mean, if you can get an additional super, because he gets the 50% with each super attack performed up to 100. So if you double super with him on the first turn, it'd be very interesting to see what his start of turn defense is on the second turn. Now, I'm not in any way saying that Super Vegeta is not good. I think he's being underrated. I think he probably is better than Bardock, just from seeing the details on paper. But again, when we compare his peaks to Kefla, like, he does not have any sort of built-in additional super, right? So he gets a guaranteed crit. He's going to do a lot of damage. I can imagine on a big turn with support, he could be hitting 20 mil, potentially even higher. But Kefla, very regularly, with a built-in additional in her passive, and then the additional from the hidden potential, like, every time I use Kefla, she is very regularly triple supering every turn. So she's dropping like 17, 18, 19, even on her first turn in base. By the time she gets to Super Saiyan 2, which will be around the time this guy is running out of his guard, she's dropping, you know, 25 to 30 million attack stat supers, whilst having a 50% chance to dodge. And then this guy kind of loses the main thing that makes him good defensively. So he will be better for shorter content and AoEs, but Kefla, again, it's kind of down to RNG, right? She could dodge every single attack that comes at her, and then in that situation, of course, she's being better defensively. But that is very situational and RNG based, whereas this guy, even with the guard for 5 turns, his start of turn defense isn't the craziest. But I do think he's pretty decent. Like I say, I think he is being underrated, but the big problem is, as I say, this weird release order, because this guy is releasing after Kefla on Global, and then technically before Kefla on JP, same with this guy. But this guy, when we finally get the celebration for Frieza on Global, which is before the anniversary, that's like 2 months from now, 2 or 3 months from now, he's releasing way after Kefla when it comes to Global. So the confusing thing, and we kind of talked about this on the episode last night, is why did they make her so crazy good? Where I see a lot of people say, oh, you know, they designed her to be this busted because she won't come out on JP until July, maybe even August, and therefore when she releases on JP, she'll be at the sort of appropriate level for what we would expect for a, you know, EZA at that time. But then my only response to that would be, well, then why did they release her on Global when they did? Because Rosé, a lot of people argue, is undertuned for the anniversary content, so him releasing early on Global is interesting because at least for the global meta he is very, very good. He'll be able to be doing decently well in the early content that drops for the anniversary, and then once the hardest fights come out, that's where he's going to potentially start to struggle. But his celebration, even though you know, they can be on some teams together. Like, his celebration did not need to have the Universe 6 EZAs in it, right? They could have EZA'd somebody else, or made an EZA that wasn't as crazy powerful. So all in all, it just seems very confusing to release Kefla, as powerful as she was, when they did release her, because every EZA now is going to be the same, right? I saw it for Bardock, I saw it for Super Vegeta, I've even said it in videos, sometimes as a joke, but sometimes even unironically, because that is the mindset that you kind of get put into by the game, releasing these kind of units in the order that they do. Is every new EZA gets announced, and you'll see memes of, like, you know, when Super Vegeta's EZA got announced, all the replies of people saying, hopefully they let the people who did Kefla and not the people who did Bardock design Super Vegeta. Every upcoming EZA is going to be compared to Kefla, and it just seems very strange they released her at the time that they did, and then released underwhelming EZAs like Bardock and potentially Super Vegeta after her. So let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. Do you completely disagree? Do you think, I mean, if anyone thinks Bardock is better than Kefla, I'd be very surprised. Do you think Super Vegeta is better than Kefla? I see arguments for, you know, like turn 1 Fusion Zamasu, right? This guy will tank better than Kefla if she doesn't dodge when it comes to the AoE. But in terms of, like, damage output, Kefla just goes absolutely crazy. Let me know what you guys think. When do you think Kefla and Rose and that stuff will come out on JP? Do you think Super Vegeta's EZA is being underrated? Let me know all your thoughts down below in the comment section. So that is going to be it for the video, guys. This has been the Masked Ningen. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Check out the links down below for the Discord and the merch store, and I will see you all again soon. Have a good one.